This is September the 23rd, 1976, around 15 minutes to 9 in the evening. And that's the debate between President Ford and candidate Carter, former governor of Georgia, which it was more or less interesting. And it just reminded me about how different it is here to the way it was in Europe. And I recollected a few things that took place during the German occupation there. One thing that I thought was very interesting was the fact that the general of the armies in our town, Fokshan, had a Jewish girlfriend, the most beautiful girl in town, a redhead. And it seemed to be that they were very modern. It was just like today. Everybody knew that she was his girlfriend and all that, and things went along well. As a matter of fact, she was even a heroine. She was did a lot of good. One incident that happened was that they caught a Jewish boy who was also a neighbor of ours where we lived, and one time, and they found a gun on him, and that was one of the greatest offenses. He was, if I can call it, court-martial for that, although he wasn't a soldier, but it was during the war, so. And it looked very bad for him. So they went to see this girl who was keeping company with the general, and somehow or other he was set free. And naturally everybody was happy about it. I don't think that he was guilty anyway. He was just a foolish young student who didn't know any better but to have a gun. So who gave it to him or how he got it, I don't know. And that was the end, which it was very, the whole town felt pretty good about that. We also had a few incidents happening in our own house. We had a maid at the time who was a very good-looking girl.
This is when again?
That was during the German occupation. And she was of Turkish origin, and she was one of those beautiful Turkish brunettes with beautiful eyes and all that. And the soldiers naturally all liked her, but she didn't seem to like all the soldiers. One soldier that liked her was a very stable man, and he wanted to marry her, and he came around and told father he wants to marry the girl. I don't remember her name. It seems to me her name was Tasika. And of course my dad didn't care too much. If he wants to marry her, he looked like the right type, so he said, oh, it's okay if she wants to marry you, it's perfectly all right. Then there was another soldier over there that was kind of a short fellow, and he sort of liked the girl too, but she didn't pay too much attention to him, and she paid very little attention to the one who wanted to marry her too. One day, it seems that this short soldier used to like to drink now and then, and one day he approached the girl, and he didn't like the idea that she refused him or something, and she came running into the kitchen where my sister happened to be at the time, and he came running after her, and he wanted to hurt her or something, slap her or something, and my sister tried to take her part, and first thing you know why he hit my sister and hit her and all that. But I think I was around at the time, and I told the father and the soldiers around there, and the soldiers came in and they pulled him apart. And he was given to understand that he better behave himself from there on, or else. One of the soldiers that came in and pulled him apart was a Jewish sergeant by the name of Buchheimer. Buchheimer was made a sergeant while he was there in Fokshan. He was very well liked by everybody, but he was very strict also. And Buchheimer was kind of sweet on my sister.
What?
One time, Buchheimer, this Jewish, the Jewish soldier, Lucia.
Right.
Yeah, Chile was married at the time already, and she was. And he asked one time he came to have dinner with us. It was for a holiday. I think coincidentally, I think it was around Rosh Hashanah too. So while we were eating there, he sort of liked. He brought a bottle of wine, by the way, champagne. Yeah, champagne. And he even furnished, I think, a duck or something. We took the duck we made a duck for and my sister made a duck for dinner. We had a beautiful dinner. And while we were sitting there at the table, he he said to Father, what a wonderful dinner my sister made. And he likes the dinner so much that he just can't help he just can't help saying that he would definitely like to marry my sister if my father would accept it, would allow it. So Father said no. He said that he doesn't think it's advisable to have a daughter marry out of your house and then go away to a strange land. She won't have any of her, nobody that she knows or anything. She'll be lost. She should be marrying a man who would stay around, remain around there where he can see what's happening to her. Buchheimer was a horse dealer or horse trader, what they call it. Yeah, and he happened to come from a very rich family. It would have been a very fine match if he would have allowed that. But he used to like horses very much. Just to show you that there was the Jewish school was made into a hospital, and there was a hotel next door to us, and Buchheimer and the rest of the soldiers were bivouacked, I guess you call it, in that hotel. And back of the hotel, there were still the stables for horses when people used to come to town and stay at the hotel. So Buchheimer used to know every horse and what he does and everything. And they had a couple of horses they called Frida and Seppel. Little ponies, sort of, and I used to like them, but they wouldn't let me ride the ponies too much. Finally, one time, this little soldier that I told you about that got in trouble at that maid that we had, put me on one of the horses, and but the horse wanted to get into the stable. He wouldn't respond to what I want him to do. One time, as he went into the stable, I'm lucky that he didn't take my head off, you know. And but he hurt my leg a little. Wasn't bad. It didn't even complain about it. Well, the other soldier that this girl had was also one of the stablemen. So every now and then, Buchheimer would be talking to my sister, and he'd say, I don't see why your father shouldn't want to let me marry you and all that. So she told him kiddingly, the way you like horses, I'm wondering how come that you proposed to me. So that's now what happened with that maid was that this other soldier who didn't like her, she wouldn't marry him, but there was a third soldier over there that was really a ladies' man. And the third soldier, though, was, she didn't care whether he married her or not, but she had an affair with this other soldier. She went to him very willingly, a fellow by the name of Lentz. So it wouldn't have been bad if she would have even gotten pregnant or something, but all at once we find out that the military police over there rounds up all the girls, maids and whatnot, and she comes around. They come around. They take in this girl too. And they take her to be examined by a doctor, and they found out that she had a venereal disease. So they sent her to a hospital, and while she was in the hospital, I used to be sent with bags of food and all that. Father wouldn't forget, that she didn't have anybody, so he would send her food and all that, while she was in the hospital. Then when she got out to the hospital, we saw her for a little while working, digging ditches and all that. And after that, they sent her away to work around the Danube or something, an entirely different town, because they didn't like to have girls of ill repute or anything like that around town. Well, that happened in this case, and then from there on, another thing that happened, that we were cursed in our town, that started even before the Germans came there, is that there was a woman, the greatest anti-Semite woman in Romania, happened to be living in our town. And her name was Tița Pavelescu, and as a matter of fact, in the history books, she's probably mentioned, because she was supposed to be a great patriot. And but strange as it seems, the Jews suffered more on account of her in other cities than they suffered in our city. Now, how that came about, I can't explain it. It's one of those things. I suppose everybody has a price. Maybe she had her price to leave the people alone over there. And Tița Pavelescu, by the way, I'll tie that in here now, had a son. And as anti-Semitic as she was, that's how much of Jewish friend to the Jews the son was. They had an orchard there where I think that they had a big tree over there with something like mulberries. I don't know what kind of. They come in white and they're red. So the boys, if they want to pick mulberries and eat them off the tree, and when Tița Pavelescu was home, would have to pay her a nickel. But when he was home and she wasn't around, he'd let them go in and eat all they want, and they didn't have to pay anything. Not only that, but it so happens that I saw him when I went to Romania on a visit. And when he spoke of Father, he sort of took off his hat. That's how he used to respect him. He used to say, he told me, he said, I still remember seeing him going every day to the temple, passing by here. And I found out when my sister was here the last time that he helped out some parents to get their child out of Romania under the communists. He stole that little girl or somebody that some Jewish people who went to Israel, the communists wouldn't allow him to take the child, so they left the child so they could go. Maybe they left the child because in order to get out of the communist country, you have to leave some security, either a parent or a wife or somebody. So chances are that they want those parents to leave that child as security. And he smuggled that child out. So you can see that being a dog is not inherited. Well, this is about all that I can remember now about what happened in Romania under the German occupation. So we can go on from here now to how it happened that after the German occupation that I worked in Bucharest, and this fellow who brought me to Bucharest had a brother-in-law who was a friend with our family. He was and he lived in a town very close to Focșani, a wine region, very well-known wine region, Panciu. That's the same town where our friends, the Winds, come from.
Oh.
Yeah. So this man from Panciu, every now and then had had to go to Bucharest. Father received a letter from uncle, uncle, that is your grandmother Sophie's father, that he would like to bring me to America. He can bring us all to America, but if I want to, as the oldest boy, why he'd want to bring me to America.
He was living in...
He was living in Chicago. And naturally, he sort of schmaltzed it a little, being the son, the flesh of, related and all that, flesh of his sister and all that, and that he'll bring me to America. And I was hesitating to go because I had a good time in Bucharest.
Why did he choose you out?
Because I was the oldest of the boys, naturally. Right. So and then I was a watchmaker too, a jeweler and watchmaker. So I wasn't a watchmaker at the time yet, but he knew that if I was over there, it was a set system that the children just develop into their take over the parents' trades or professions. Well, he anyway, he wrote that he would want me to come there. When this fellow Kaufman came to Bucharest for some business, naturally he stayed with his brother-in-law.
Who was Kaufman again?
Kaufman was the friend from Panciu that, yeah. And I was working there for his brother-in-law who brought me with him to Bucharest. See? So I asked him at the time, I had just received the letter, and I said, Mr. Kaufman, what should I do? I received a letter from father where my uncle wants to bring me to America and all that, and I don't know what to do, whether I should go or whether I should remain here. So he said, for God's sake, are you asking me a question like this? If you got a chance to go to America, you go to America. What do you want to do? You want to be a soldier for those anti-Semites here? Who wouldn't want to go? So, yeah, over there we call it Volach. Volach is Wallachia. Wallachia. Wallachia is Romania. It's it used to be Wallachia, Moldavia. So Wallachia is one of the territories, So he used to call them Wallachia. So he said, well, you want to be a soldier for the Wallachians? Those anti-Semites might as well go. So I decided I would go, and I wrote back to Father, and Father said, all right, you come back, and we'll arrange for you to go. When I went back, I worked for Father for a while, and it probably didn't take long. It probably took about a few months or a year, so that for him to get me a passport and all that, and the permission to come to America. Before I left, I went to see the people in Foltechane, which where my grandmother lived. My grandmother was quite a gal. She must have been at that time probably about 85 or 90 years old.
Your father's mother?
My father's mother. She was a little woman. She was very much like Tony. And but she was very clever, very hard worker. And she was a game girl. You would say almost that Tony inherited her temperament. As a matter of fact, I like to mention now that Father came from Poland, from around Lemberg. When Father came to Romania, he was about 5 years old, and he was next to the youngest. Mm-hmm. And of course, he was her favorite. One time I was there in Foltechane, and his younger brother even mentioned that he wasn't too happy about the fact that Father was always favored. If she had something a little better in meat or anything like this, he'd be the one to get it. So anyway, that's not the question. But the way they happened to come and settle in Foltechane, I mean grandmother and grandfather, was because grandfather had a very hard time making a living. All he knew is to study the books, the Jewish books, the Talmud and the Torah and all that, and you couldn't make a living from that. But he joined a troupe of actors, Jewish actors. And in those days, the actors would travel in Poland and Russia and in Romania. And traveling with the troupe, he came to Foltechane. I don't know. I don't want to say anything. I never heard anything bad about it. Why he settled in Foltechane, or why he wanted to remain there, I don't know. Maybe he liked the town. Maybe he had a chance. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that Foltechane needed a rabbi, not a rabbi, a rabbi. A rabbi is a man who teaches little children Hebrew and Talmud and the Torah and all that. So he got a job there to teach him that, and as such he remained there. Well, he didn't have any money to send grandmother to come to bring her children. She had 5 children, I guess, at a time. So somehow or other, she worked, skimped, and saved and whatnot, and she managed to get together the money and got all the kids on the train, and she came to Foltechane. And they lived probably in a hut or something, wherever they could, until she was able to get a hold of a piece of ground, very small piece of ground, and she went ahead and she built her own home with her own hands. Over there, they build the homes sort of like in Mexico, out of adobe. Mm-hmm. So they get some straw, and they mix, they wind the straw up a little, they mix it, they dip it in the adobe, and then they just throw it onto the wall, and onto the frame and all that. And she built her own home. At the home, I don't know, but it was there when I left, anyway. And she was very good in also in making syrups. So she used to make syrups, and sometimes she'd sell some of the syrups because people liked it. And we used to get syrups every year from her. Well, grandfather, all he did was teach the children. I remember one time I was there when I was little, and I remember even like today, the benches that he had, they were plain wooden benches, like picnic benches over here. And they were like in a schwitzbut, one bench a little bit higher than the other, and the children would sit there. And I think I took a lesson once or twice in his school there. I don't remember what I learned. I didn't care too much for studying that, and don't remember too much. And then we had pretty near the whole family, naturally, was in Faltichen, father's family. When father was in Faltichen, he wanted to get to do something. So somehow or other he liked watchmaking. My mother's father was a watchmaker in Faltichen. And father went there to apply for a job or to apply to learn the trade. And he worked there until he became older, until he got to be about 17, 18 years old, until the army took him. But he fell in love with mother, who was the daughter of his master. And when he was called to the army, he said, "Look I'm going the army, and when I get through with the army, I want to come back and marry you." And he said, "I don't want any dowry or anything, because you had to have a dowry over there in order to marry a man. So I don't want any dowry. I just want to marry you because I love you enough." And so he went to Fokshan to be a soldier. When he was in Fokshan, he found out that if you buy yourself a horse, then and you donate the horse to the army, you don't have to be very active in the army. You can serve only once a week or so. So he got a horse somehow or other and donated it to the army. And he said, "Look, I don't have to wait now through with the army. I want to marry you now because I don't have to serve more than once a week or so for 5 years. So let's get married and we'll go over to Fokshan and we'll open a store over there." He went back there, and of course they didn't have money for a store. So he just rented a window from a barber, and made a bench out of a board and all that, and whatever tools he could get a hold of. And he started practicing watchmaking. Well, he didn't have money for a place to live. So the barber told him he'll let him live in the back, but he had no bed. So they went ahead and they built a couple of sawhorses and some boards on it and some straw mattresses, and he was in housekeeping in the back, housekeeping back of the barber shop, and he had the business right in front of the barber shop. By the way, he remained very good friends with those barbers. They were all Christians and all that, but he remained very good friends with them. And I think pretty near up to the day he died, he still went to that barber shop to get his haircuts and shaves too. As a matter of fact, one time he didn't, when he got older, by the way, when father was young, even when he married mother, he was an atheist. He was atheistic, yes. And when he got older, though, he got to be very kosher. He lost that daughter of 18 years, so that kind of changed his life, and he turned to religion.
Is that right?
Yeah, he turned to religion, and uh, he wouldn't shave. You know, Jewish people are not allowed to put anything sharp to their face. So he wouldn't shave anymore with a razor. So he would go there, and the barber would shave him with his clippers, you know. You see, so that there wouldn't be anything sharp. So one time he wrote to me when I was here that if I could send him a clipper, so I bought him a clipper, and I sent him over there. So he used to go to the barber shop, put his clipper in his pocket, and the Christian barber would shave him with that clipper and all that, you know. So you can see that will give you an idea of that like I said, I think that most of the Christians there were not anti-Semitic. So even when they used to say that, they were more or less they were very charitable, very yeah. Well, anyway, that not to get away from that subject, I just wanted to know. Well, when I went to see Grandma, can I go back to that?
Sure. Right.
When I went to see Grandma in Faltichen, I went and I said goodbye to everybody over there. Finally, I go to say goodbye to Grandmother. And Grandmother goes ahead, and she felt very bad about me leaving and all that. And then when I say goodbye to her, the first thing you know, she kisses me and kisses me. Then she takes my hand and kisses my hand. Well, I couldn't figure why should she kiss my hand and all that. And I went to my uncle, and I felt feeling very bad about it. I went to my uncle there, the youngest one. The youngest one was a very clever man. By the way, he was a socialist too, my uncle, and I had a cousin over there who was a great socialist in Romania. Just to show you what type of people they were, he was a socialist, and he used to go around making speeches for people to go out on strike, unionize the factories, whatever little factories they were over there. And one time when they sent around, I think it was Karl yet, sent around the militia or the soldiers to round up the socialists in Romania, they were rounding, and some of them even got shot. So this cousin of mine was in very, very bad, he was in a very bad situation. So he ran over to uncle, which became his father-in-law. You know, he married a cousin. He married this uncle's daughter. He was a cousin and married. So he went over there, and uncle went out, and to see what he can do. So he ran across a garbage truck, a garbage cart, you know. So he took the garbage man over there. He bought off the garbage man and put this cousin under the garbage and saved him. Yeah, from getting killed, getting shot. Anyway,
these are your father's brothers.
Father's brothers. Well, this is the uncle who was that clever that I went to see. And ask him. Look, I was very depressed. I want to say goodbye to Grandma, and she kissed my hand. I said it depressed me terribly. What? He said, "Oh, don't pay any attention. Your grandma is an old woman. You can't tell what might have gone through her mind. Maybe when she kissed your head, she might have thought that you're like an angel to her." So he had an answer for it, you know, and I felt a little better about leaving. I think that I think I saw Grandma once more when I went on a visit to Romania. Well, finally, after I said goodbye to everybody, and I got the passport and all that, going to get the passport in Bucharest, we met a clergyman, a Christian clergyman, who was going to Israel, to Jerusalem, to become a monk. And he told Father, he said, "Why do you want to send him to America for? After all, Jerusalem is really the city he should go to. Why don't you let him to go to Jerusalem with me? And after all, I'll teach him to pray to the same God that you pray to and all that. And over there, he'll become a man. If he wants to become a monk too, all right. If not, wants to be a Christian, all right. If not, he'll at least learn the Bible. He'll learn the religion and all that. And he'll learn to be a man. You know how we live over there? We live on boards. We don't even put mattresses on our beds." And he said, "Let him go to Jerusalem." My father said, "No." He said, "No. I promised him to go to America. I promised my brother-in-law." He didn't tell him that he wouldn't want him to become a Christian, actually. So staying there, you know. Well, one thing, though, about Father, I think he still had a little bit of the attitude not to be too religious. Because we used to go to when we were in Bucharest, we used to go to a restaurant over there that was a very kosher restaurant. So one time, some Hungarian Jews who also were wanted to go to Israel, to America rather, or to America at the time, were at the consulate when I was getting my passport, and they started talking to Father, and they asked him, they were older people actually, they asked him, "Where do you eat?" So Father said, "Oh, I go over there, so and so and so to eat." He said, "You go to that guy there is not kosher enough." He said, "We'll take you to a real kosher place where I assure you that everything you get is perfectly kosher." So we go to that place to eat, and we meet those people over there, and when Father gets the bill to pay it, he said, "I don't know how much kosher this place is, but I think that place there is just as kosher. Besides that, it doesn't cost much either." So anyway, I got my passport. I went back to Fochan, and I stayed there till the time came for me to go. When the time came to go, and I had my ship ticket, and I also bought Father rather also bought for me the ticket on the train. And we go on the train, and we meet a lot of younger people, some older people, all going to America.
Where was the train going?
That was the train was going to Paris. The ticket was bought to leave from Havre,
Right.
Havre, France.
Right.
When we started out of Romania,
This is who now? Who?
the bunch of us, you know, on the train, I met all those people going to America.
Let me go back a minute.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you were getting ready to go, you know?
Oh, I felt pretty good.
Excited?
Oh, yes, oh, yes. To be truthful with you, I didn't have a conscience. My conscience, I hate to admit it, but I think that pretty near every young fellow that leaves home this way, I don't think has a conscience, the conscience bother him. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt pretty good about going,
Scared?
especially since, no, I wasn't scared. No, that's one of the things. I was never scared about going. I always felt, on the contrary, I always felt very capable of anything I ever undertook. I felt capable of.
Excited?
Yeah, excited.
What did you think was there?
Pardon me?
What did you think was awaiting you?
Making money. Making money. I knew that American dollars. I knew that. By the way, that's one of the things. While I wasn't scared and all that, back of my mind, whenever I even from Bucharest, you know, like I told you, back of my mind was the fact I'll be making money and I'll send it home to help the folks. I never went with the idea of just making money to come back.
Mm-hmm.
I went with the idea of making money to help the folks out.
And how did your family feel? What was their attitude about it? Your brothers and sisters? Your
Well,
mom?
my brothers and sisters didn't. They, they were kids, and they didn't cry too much or minded too much about me going. The one who felt it very bad was father.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the night after I left, they tell me that father took it so hard he couldn't sleep all night. And he was walking around. They say that they even heard it upstairs. It was walking around and hitting himself on the head and saying, "Why did I ever let him go?" Well, anyway, I got on the train, and as soon as I got on the train, I had a good time. I was just the right age.
Which was?
Which was about, I was 17, a little over 17. To be closer to it, I'd say I was about 17 and about 7-8 months, something like that.
Well, what month
Yeah.
did you leave?
I left around fall. It must have been in the month of October, something like that, September or October, and it was starting to get cold. November, yeah, it was starting to get cold around that time, and leaving Bucharest, not Focșani, because I left from Bucharest because we were given a guide, by the way, a young fellow too, a man who was able to speak French and all that, and he had charge of all of us to go. So on the train, I had a good time. As a matter of fact, I had such a good time that there was a very pretty Hungarian girl over there, and I paid quite a bit of attention to her, and she was very receptive too. And I was just around the age where I could, where I started to feel the beauty of femininity and all that.
What language did you?
She was from Transylvania, and she spoke Romanian too. She didn't speak too well, but she spoke Romanian quite well. And they all associated me with her, and there were other boys there, some even from my own town, from Focșani, that lived with me, and they were a little bit envious of me that I was able to get to know that girl, get to communicate with her. So when we come to Budapest, I think it was, or Vienna, I don't know, one of those towns, this fellow tells us that, all right, we'll put you up in the hotel, you all come with me, and we'll be together. Well, this girl was going with her uncle and all that, the family. They were going to another hotel, to a better hotel. We would have gone over to a mediocre hotel and all that. So I told the fellow, I said, listen, you go ahead, take your bunch, and I'll meet you by that time, and I'll go to this hotel. And I went to the same hotel that the girl with the family, her uncle. It wasn't her own family, her own parents. She was. I think she must have been a little older than I was, maybe about 2-3 years older. So she was more mature. But anyway, I went to that hotel. Well, we were supposed to meet those people that were in the other hotel with the leader. And somehow or other, we never made contact with them. One day goes by, 2 days, and we don't seem to meet them. Finally, we go to the I think the consulate or someplace and say, look, we came here and all that. They say, for God's sake, those people left yesterday. So we got into. So we went ahead and we took the train ourselves. By the way, traveling from Romania to Vienna, I think it was, Oh, pardon me, it was Prague. Prague, Czechoslovakia. That's right. I recollect now. It was Prague. Traveling from Romania to Prague. First, when we left Romania, we got a pretty good train to travel in. We got place to sit down and all that. But after that, it was miserable.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When we left Romania, I must have transferred between Romania and Prague. We must have about maybe a half a dozen different times. I counted that between Romania and Paris, we traveled about 14 days and traveled about and transferred about 10 different times.
Wow.
Yes, we traveled in cattle cars, and boy, those things used to shake the guts out of you. And the wind was blowing through those things there. It was miserable. I wouldn't be surprised. That's how. Then from Prague on, we still had bad sailing as far as when I think we just got better trains in Germany, although Germany was a former enemy and all that, but we got better trains in Germany and in France. That's the only place. In Prague, at the border in Prague, I happened to meet my former boss from Bucharest, the rich one,
Yeah.
the one the wholesaler.
Right.
And he wished me good luck and all that. And then when he came to Bucharest, he wrote to Father immediately a letter that he met me and all that. He was very nice that way. Well, anyway, I went to Bucharest, and to show you how gullible I was given the address of a man in Romania who lived in Paris.
Right.
So when I came to Paris, I went to look for that fellow, and that fellow got me a room in the hotel where he lived. Over there, single people lived in hotels. It didn't have any facilities or anything, didn't even have a bath, for the whole bunch. You had to go to bathe in bathhouse. And this fellow was he came very well recommended. And I got sick in Paris. I got sick.
Before we get to whatever happened to your Hungarian girlfriend?
Oh, she got off, I think, to go to Antwerp to get the ship from Antwerp, and I got out to get the ship to Le Havre. But I missed the ship. When I came, on account of I couldn't make it. I missed the ship too, so I had to go and make arrangements to go on a different ship, and I came on a Canadian ship, Metagama.
You got sick in Paris?
I got sick. Yeah, I got sick in Paris, but I think that I got sick from the traveling. Those my resistance got poor, and
what did you have?
I could never tell. I think that I had double pneumonia. That's what I think. But in Paris, they took me to a hotel Rothschilds. The Rothschilds would only take Jewish people and Christians from all around the neighborhood. So since I was Jewish, they took me to Hotel Rothschilds, and I was given very, very good care.
It's a hospital.
It's a hospital, yes. But I got very sick, and I felt very depressed because they took and they isolated me in a room. I wasn't in the ward, and I didn't like the idea because the day before they put me in that room, a blonde young fellow, that probably lived in the neighborhood there, had passed away in that room. And when they put me in that room, I didn't know, I couldn't communicate really well enough yet by that time, and they wouldn't tell me anyway. So
All alone.
yeah, well, but fortunately I met some Romanians there, and the nurses were very good to me. And I was clever enough, I guess, to know. I was from Romania. I learned that in order to get good service, you've got to do something about it. So the first thing I did, I had a watch, a wristwatch that I brought from home, and the nurse who was giving me the most care, I was getting most care from, I took the wristwatch off and I gave it to the nurse. I don't think that she gave me better care, but anyway, I thought that when I got better and they put me back in the ward, the Romanian fellow over there told me, he said, Herman, you know what you did? You must have been delirious or something. You went ahead and you took your watch off and you gave it to that nurse. What'd you do that for? Well, we had a good time doing the ward while I was convalescing. We had.
How long were you isolated before you got back in the ward?
Oh, I think I must have been isolated about a week or 10 days, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was in the hospital for about a month at least. I was convalescing, and the doctor would come and see me every day, and they used to tell me, oh, he isn't strong enough, you better keep him here. By the way, they would ask me one time if I've got anybody to take care of me. So I told them no, so that might have been too the reason why they...
Did they charge in this hospital?
Oh, no, all for free, all free. Good food, for in those days food was very scarce in Paris. As a matter of fact, food was so scarce that I met all the Romanian boys. It seems like all of Romanian Focșani boys have moved to Paris. So I met some of those Romanian boys and from Focșani and all that. And I used to socialize with them. And they would sleep till 12 o'clock so they won't have breakfast. They couldn't get a job. But one of the boys was very fortunate. He got a job on the railroad. So every night he would bring home a sack of coal. And another fellow used to know where he could buy seine herring, herring, and that fellow would bring home a bag of seine herring, and we'd make we'd make the stove in that fellow's room where that used to get the coal, and we'd boil the herring in there, and we'd have herring. And in those days, they started learning how to make French fried potatoes the same way as they make them here. Over there, they call it squeeze.
Squeeze?
Squeeze, yeah, it's French fried potatoes. So one of the boys, or I would sometimes buy a bag full of squeeze, and we'd have a picnic over there. We'd really have a party.
Not bad. This is after you got out?
After I got out of the hospital. And between the time that time came to, because I had to change the ticket, so I had to wait for another ship.
How long was that?
Well, it must have been about a month and a half or so. Altogether, I was about 3 months in Paris. Wow. Of course, I had money, and I didn't have to eat with them. I used to eat with them only sometimes, but most of the times I would eat in a restaurant over there, a Jewish-Spanish restaurant. And they would have beans a lot over there, and in Europe we make beans. I don't if like my wife makes garbanzo beans,
right.
So I would put some sugar on the beans. So they thought I was crazy, sugar on the beans. Anyway, I would eat out there. And I would go to a cafe where a lot of Romanians would gather too. And sometimes I'd play a game of backgammon and all that. And sometimes I'd just kibitz over there. But there were one thing that I remember very vividly that happened over there at that cafe was that there were two brothers that came into that cafe. One of them was working, and the other one wasn't working. One of them was working by selling watches and jewelry and fake watches and all that and whatnot for a high price. And the other one wouldn't work at all. But the one who wouldn't work was married. And he was married to a girl who had a very fine job, was doing very well. And besides that, she was going to university, to Sorbonne, to the University of Paris at night. But this fellow wouldn't come home. So he'd want to stay with us in kibbutz or something. And sometimes he'd come home late at night and all that. So one time she came in, and she made a terrible holler about him not coming home. And she hollered so much until they finally he couldn't take it. So the cafe man told them, "Look, you better get out." So she got out, and they were hollering. They were pulling each other on the street and all that, and it was a terrible thing. This fellow just didn't care for her. The more and she was a good-looking woman, very fine-looking girl. Working for him, going to college and all that, and he didn't want her. He was. So he said, his brother told us one time, he said, "I don't know what the guy wants." He said that I'm just afraid that he shouldn't commit suicide one of these days, because one day he said, he even told me that he feels like committing suicide. So I told him, "Look, if you want to commit suicide, do something for the world. Go out and kill the president or the secretary." Stay there. Then at least you make yourself a name if you want to commit suicide. Suicide. Well, anyway,
We're about wrapping up on
this went on until finally, as it happens, when I had to go to the hospital, I left the money with this man that I was recommended to in Paris.
Right.
And when the time came for me to go, I was worried because he was a traveling salesman, jewelry salesman, by the way.
Yeah.
But a traveling salesman, I didn't know whether he'd come back in time to give me the money that I needed yet to pay up for the ticket. But fortunately, he came back, and everything turned out all right. And I got onto the ship and Metagama, but I got a very, very bad ticket on the ship. But anyway, I got on the ship. This fellow did everything he could. He took me to different places. One time, he even took me to the Gare du Nord to take the train to Havre.
Okay.
Well, that's all.
Well, I think we're about at the end.
Yeah.
So,
You
rather
wanna?
than starting into something,
Yeah, you want me to start into
the ship,
what
maybe.
went on, or you want me?
Think of anything else about Paris the next time?
Yes.
Talk about that first, and then. The
Oh
ship.
yeah, I see. Okay, I'll do that. Fine.
Okay. There you go.
That's all now.
Yep.
Okay. This is Thursday, September 30th, about 8:30 p.m. And before I go any further, or rather get on the ship, I'd like to go back to my days in Paris, which I would consider one of the greatest experiences I ever had. Well, one is that I remember that I went through in Paris was a restaurant I went to. I met a fellow over there who father one time hired when we were home to be my guard. And because I was the smallest in the class practically, and sometimes I'd get beat up by some bullies or bigger guys. So this fellow was supposed to be my guard. And I met him in Paris, and naturally he still felt he was my guard. And he wanted to see that I get along well and everything. He said, "Where do you eat?" I said, "Oh, I eat at that Spanish restaurant, so." He said, "You're wasting your time there. I'll take you to a restaurant where you'll really get a good meal, like at home." And so I say, "Oh, that's fine." I said, "Let's go." So we went to that restaurant over there, and I took my tab, and he took his tab, and one Dutch treat, which was all right. Then, during the course of conversation, he told me, "This restaurant is frequented by quite a few fellows that I know. One of the reasons why they come here is because over here two fellows can come in, they can eat and pay for only one." So the way the situation was in Paris at times, I told you, nobody had a job. And naturally, it was a logical place to eat. So he said, "I'll pick you up. I'll tell you, Friday night we should go there, because then they have soup and chicken and fish and all that, and we'll really have a feast." So he picked me up, and we went there Friday night to eat. When we get through eating, I take my tab, he takes his, and when we walk out the door, when we come to the cashier, I pay my tab, and he just motions, "Oh, how much tip?" And he walks out. I couldn't figure out how the heck to give the price of one. Well, of course, after that, he asked me again to go sometimes, but we developed a habit from home, and I think we all were pretty near raised that way, that one time when you get stuck or you get fooled, you're not aware of it, so naturally you take it. But the next time you're better off, you just don't get involved again, so you won't have to. So I never went with him again. That was the end of the restaurant over there. Another incident that took place over there was at the cafe. The cafe and the restaurant were two different things. The cafe over there only serves coffee and all that, maybe a crescent sometimes or a little pastry. But so the cafe that we used to hang around in, most of them were men coming in there. But there was one young girl coming in there too, and she always come in there and sit down at the cafe, sit down there and have her coffee and all that. And the boys were telling me, "Say, you know that girl over there, she's a high-priced girl. But I'll bet that if you wanted to go with her, why, she would be very reasonable. She might even not charge you anything." So I said, "What do you mean? Why shouldn't she charge me anything?" Said, "Oh, well, that's just the reason why, because you don't understand it, because you're too young. And when it comes to a young fellow, they'll do anything just so they can get that young fellow." But I suppose I was too timid to say anything, and she used to sometimes try to strike up a conversation and all that, but I was considered a young fellow. I was considered a kid, as a matter of fact, among all the fellows. Even when I was at home in Europe, in Romania, I was considered too young, and maybe they put me down even more so in my mind. I considered that maybe they're right, so I just didn't try to. As a matter of fact, another thing that happened was that at the hotel where I stayed, one morning I was still in bed, and somebody comes knocking at my door. And there was a woman who came from Romania, and she had a little girl. The little girl must have been about 3 or 4 years old, but she was a very, very beautiful woman herself. And knocked at the door, and she said, "May I come in?" I said, "Sure, come in." And she comes in her nightgown. But the little, no, I think she came in without the little girl at the time, not sure. So she come and sat on my bed and all that, and I couldn't figure out. I wasn't worldly enough to know what to do. So I talked to her, she talks to me, and from what I surmise is that she was more after the fact that she would like to attach to somebody that might help her to go to America, because she said she had a brother in Chicago, but somehow or other she can go to America. I said, "Why can't you go?" She said, "Well, I've got that little one. And if I wouldn't have the little one, it wouldn't be any problem at all. But with the little one, they asked me, well, who is he, and or who is she, and who the parents are, and all that." And so I don't know exactly what happened at the time, whether she was called or, but then she left the room, and I didn't hear any more about it. She didn't do that again after that. But when this fellow who was my sponsor, or who I used to watch over me, the jewelry salesman, came back, the manager, the lady manager of the hotel, called me down while he was there, and I went down there. And they told me in a very nice way, she said that, "Look, we don't tolerate things like this, having girls kind of going into somebody's room." I said, "But I didn't call her." You know. Said, "Yes, but if they ever come in like this, just tell them to get out, because we don't..." Well, I think that was a little bit overdone, because if she wanted to, she could have called her out herself or something, you know. So I take it for granted that it was just a front. But I didn't see that woman very much anymore after that. And she didn't come anymore. And I think that when I finally got to Chicago, I tried to find her brother, but what became of it, I don't remember. Maybe she was, maybe he brought her to America after all, or something.
City of Love. Paris, the city of love.
Paris, the city of love. Yeah, it really lives up to the city of love, no question about it. It was very, very aggressive as far as love is concerned. As a matter of fact, now that you're telling me that, I remember walking between, this was Plaza Triumph and the Trocadero. I used to like that walk, and I'd be walking many a times there and back, especially after the hospitalization, after being hospitalized, sometimes you'd see a lot of women during the daytime when they were supposed to be working and all that, and they'd be walking on the street. Of course, I couldn't figure out what it was. I know one thing, though. I went in one time, and I wanted to be French, too, so I bought myself a hat. And it's almost a must. In order to be French, you got to wear the proper hat. And it was more of the humbug style. And it was a beautiful hat, velour type and all that, and I paid quite a price for it. Then I bought myself an umbrella, because somehow or other it always seems to rain in Paris. So I had to have an umbrella. And then, as I had to run for the bus to take pretty near on the last day that I was in Paris, I was sitting on a bench, and I put the umbrella down on the bench, and the umbrella remained there as a souvenir, you know. But the hat, of course, I took along. Well, of course, the hat has had a certain history about it, too, because when I came to this country, well, that's the first thing they made me change, is the hat. But I still think it was a beautiful hat. I don't know why they did it, why they wanted me to change. They said I'll probably look green or something if I don't change it. Well, there isn't anything else that I can remember about Paris that I really could say. Uh, I took the train on the day that I was
Sounds like
supposed
you
to
had a good
leave.
time there, though.
Oh yes, yes. You. As a matter of fact, uh, as I uh, as you remember, or I told you that people were telling me when I left Romania that once I get to Paris, I probably won't want to go to America anymore. It proved itself, that statement proved itself to me, because I did like Paris enough to want to stay there. However, I ran short of money and I had to write back, I had to ask for more money. And naturally, receiving the money and all that, I felt I had to pay it back. And the only way I figured I could pay it back is coming to America. Besides that, they were depending on me. So one jeweler, in fact, who was had a jewelry store downstairs of the hotel, uh, a few days before I left, I told him, look, I'm a jeweler too and a watchmaker. And he said, gee, why didn't you tell me? I could have used you over here. I could have given you some work and all that. So maybe it was lucky for me that I didn't do it, so I could come here. Probably I would have stayed there. So on the day that I had to leave, I took the train to Havre, which is a short run. And I got onto the ship Metagama. It was a Canadian ship. In those days, I didn't know about first class, second class, third class, or anything like that. But I wasn't in either one of those classes. I was in steerage, but I didn't know it. I thought I was in third class. But it was, you could see the way the ship was shaped, or the rooms were shaped over there, that was about the end. You couldn't go any lower than that. There was one thing, though, about that steerage, and that is that people had a marvelous time on the ship. There were a lot of Italian immigrants. There were quite a few Romanians. There were people from Poland. And there were girls and men and boys and girls, and they were singing. The Italians were singing, and they started teaching me Italian somehow or other. I don't know why, but they always picked on me to teach me new languages. They taught me naturally. What would they teach me? Some songs or some poems that weren't probably aren't fit to be printed. But I picked it up, and I picked up even a few words. I could even communicate with them to a certain extent. Then on the steerage also was a girl from Romania who was quite a gay girl. She used to be the life of the party. She was a little older, and she was, I would say, even ugly. But somehow or other, she was getting the people motivated. She used to get them in good spirits anyway. And then there was a girl that was going to Canada, to Vancouver, and one girl was going to Detroit. The prettiest girl in there was the one was going to Detroit. And she must have been about my, maybe, I couldn't say that pretty near any one of them were older than I was, because I wasn't 18 yet, so they were older than I was. And but they all would have liked me to go with them to America. Most of them naturally would have liked me to go here and get married to them. But if I would have been the aggressive type, like I say, I could have really had, even so I had a good time, but I could have probably had even a better time. Yeah, I might have even. This girl that went to Detroit was, as I say, she was the most beautiful girl probably of them all. But she was the kind that used to have that look about, that whimsical look about her. So the older fellows over there, one time in a conversation, I heard one of them say to the other, "Yeah, she's got a whimsical look of a girl that's been around plenty." That girl who went to Vancouver, though, seemed to be like the type of a girl that the fellow would probably even want to marry. And I got, although I was friendly with all of them, but with this one I got friendly enough so that she would even open up to me around, about her feelings and all that. And she said, "Why don't you come to Vancouver with me?" So so I said, "Well, I am my obligation is to go to Chicago, and I can very well change it." And then we were eating one time, and she said she said the same thing. There were other people around, and they said, "Why don't you go to Vancouver with her?" One of them that was in on the conversation came from Canada. He said, "Why should you go to a place like Chicago when you can go to Vancouver?" He said, "All the rich people in Canada go to Vancouver for the winter. So you can imagine what kind of place it is, and here you want to go to Chicago when you got the chance like this to go." Well, anyway, it didn't help any because I was committed already, so I went to, I was going to go to. Now, another case that I remember, I don't know whether this might not be for, there were the cooks, the lower class of the workers on the ship, or the sailors or whatever they were on the ship, would come down to steerage, naturally, to have a good time and all that. So one time, one of the cooks comes down there, and there was a fellow over there, was a pretty good looking fellow, and he, instead of going for the girls around there, he went for the fellow. I didn't understand today, today naturally, after that it kind of dawned on me why he went, and then another time, one fellow said, "You know what? I was lucky and I got one of the cooks on the side, and I was able to get a herring. But," he said, "we haven't got any bread to eat it with. We haven't got anything to eat it with. What should we do with it?" So one of them said, "Don't worry, you get a herring out. We'll eat it." Then another fellow said, "I got a couple of apples." So we went into a cabin and we had a real feast of herring and apples, believe it or not. But somehow or other it went over. It seemed to taste pretty good. I don't know why. It tasted pretty good.
What were the accommodations basically like?
Yeah, they were just bunks in little cubby holes. And the thing, then the ship would go up and down. My God, when you took a step, you all of a sudden you were you thought you were stepping. Instead of that, you were you felt like an elevator going down and real fast, And but I never once fell or hurt myself, and I don't think of anybody ever hurting themselves.
You didn't get seasick?
No, I never got seasick on a ship. Never got seasick. I ate and real well. I never got seasick. Strange as it seems. I guess seasickness is a lot too about the way you think of it. You can sort of. So it didn't bother me at all. But otherwise, the ship made good time. It seems to me that it took 9 days to go between Havre and St. John, Canada.
Oh, that's where you landed?
We went, yeah. I went to St. John, Canada. And I got out at St. John.
Was that Newfoundland?
Newfoundland, yeah. It's up north of Quebec. It's around, it's around Gander there. No, Gander's Island. Where you leave for Gander. I think you leave from around there. It's up north, It's and So when we came to St. John and we got off the ship, it's amazing, but everything seemed different. Now, I didn't even need the Statue of Liberty to remind me that I'm in America, because that's the first time in my life that I saw a building made out of lumber.
Is that right?
In Europe, you don't see that. Maybe in the woods someplace, but well, even you, do you remember many? I don't
No,
remember.
stones.
Stones, and that's the first time. So you knew you were in this country, and besides that, they were spacious. That's another thing that really opens your eyes to it. Why, they had the hall there where the immigrants came, but a big hall. I was thinking to myself, what a dance hall this would make, because I never saw anything, an auditorium as big as that, or whatever it was. And naturally, they examined me and all that.
This is in Canada.
That was in Canada. I'm quite sure I was examined in Canada. I wasn't examined anymore, because I think I wouldn't be surprised that Canada had the same laws as this country had. So if you were examined over there, you were allowed to go back to this, to come through the border here without being examined anymore. I went to there, I don't recollect too well. I think that they gave us something to eat, or we bought. Oh, that's where I got acquainted with ginger ale. And I thought that ginger ale was one of the finest drinks ever. I thought I was drinking champagne or something, you know. I didn't care much if that had alcohol or didn't have alcohol, but the taste was very good. And I spent quite a bit of money on ginger ale whenever I could. And what we ate and all that, the food was pretty good. And they put us on a train to go to Chicago, to Detroit rather. I think I transferred in Detroit. Yes, that's right. Well, the trains in Canada were nice, big trains. That's another thing that was different than in Europe. They were real spacious trains, and they set us one on a seat, which was something unheard of, to have one person on each seat and one person across from me. Well, somebody was saying, you know, those seats can be opened up and you can make a bed out of them. Geez, that was something that really I had to write home about, because to think that you were on a seat that can be made in a bed and all that. But I don't suppose any one of us knew exactly how to do it, and the porters weren't instructed to, or the conductors weren't instructed to open up this. So we sat all the time. We traveled. I think it took us about over a day or so to travel between St. John, maybe closer to the 2 to 36 hours or so, to travel to Detroit, where I transferred into a train to go to Chicago. When we came to Detroit, it was really hard because I didn't know the language or anything, but they had they have those travel travel help, or whatever they call it over here. You know, Traveler's Aid, that's right. And they even took us and they put us on the certain train and coach that we were supposed to have to go to Chicago. Well, we had a very nice train. We traveled to Chicago, but always sitting up. It wasn't. That was luxurious enough for us, as a matter of fact, too. Well, in Detroit, I can say that I lost pretty near all the friends that I acquired on the ship, because there weren't any that I acquired on the trip in Europe that went with me on the ship. When I came to, when the train near Chicago, that's where I really had a picnic, because when we came to Chicago Heights, the conductor hollers out, "Chicago Heights." Well, to me, I was in Chicago, and I took my, so he knew, I guess he had the experience, so he just took me and pushed me back to my seat because he knew that I wasn't looking for that. Well, it didn't take long between Chicago Heights, naturally, and Chicago. I came in, I think, by way of the Illinois Central. I'm almost sure, Illinois Central. That's on Roosevelt. And would you be interested to know where I came, where I stopped, or from when I came to the Illinois Central, to the station, I just went ahead and got into a cab, and I gave him my uncle's address.
On a piece of paper or something?
On a piece of paper, that's right. And he took me straight down to Maxwell Street to where Uncle had the shop.
This is
And
Uncle who?
Uncle, that's Sophie's father, Uncle Sucher. Uncle Sucher. He's the one who brought me. So I went over there. So they all, they said in Yiddish, so I could understand. They said, look at, you call this fellow a greener? He's not greener. He gets into a cab and he comes over, and yeah, he's not greener. So,
Yeah.
so they paid the cab and all that. I presume they would have probably waited for me if I would have known exactly when I come and all that. But I didn't know that you could telegraph or ask anybody. I came over there, so I came there by cab. Well, when I came, why, naturally, everybody was glad to see me, and they received me very nice. I don't think your own parents could receive you any nicer than they did, every one of them. And then they took me upstairs. They lived not far from there, on Peoria. They had a little flat over there, and they took me upstairs, and they fed me right away. And it seems to me, even before they fed me, the first thing they gave me was physics. So they said that everybody comes to America should first take a physics, get rid of what you brought along from Europe. So they gave me a physics too. And naturally, they fed me very well. And a strange thing, one of the first things that I remembered coming here and sitting down to eat at a table with people, with my own people and all that, was that they didn't portion off your food. That was something I unheard of, not to portion off your food. In Europe, we were known even to be portioned off our bread. We were given a slice of bread. We wanted more, we'd get more, but to put a basket of bread on the table, take all you want, and put a platter of meat on the table. The soup, of course, was different, but everything else was portioned off. And it really impressed me very much. And I had my dinner over there and all that, and they let me rest real well. They weren't doing, they were comparatively well fixed for that time, because Uncle had the store, and he was making a living more or less out of the store.
What kind of store?
A jewelry store, yeah. And it was in a good location, but most of the businesses that he did was work. But he always had nice food at the table. The apartment was very desirable, very, very nice in those days. It didn't have a bath or a shower, but it had the toilet facilities in the room. It seems to me that it even had some, no, I don't think it had a bath, shower. And in order to take baths, we used to go, there was a bathhouse on 14th Street, not far, and we used to go there for our baths, or schwitz. I used to like take baths, I didn't go to schwitz. But otherwise, the food was very, very good. As a matter of fact, it was so good that a nephew of my aunt's, uncle's wife, who had lost his mother not long before that, He was, his name was Sal Hertig. And he was a young fellow, and he had just gone in business that time as a printer, and he got a printing space in Rothschild's department store in Chicago, and he was doing very nicely too. This fellow used to have his food. He used to eat by my aunt. He used to sleep by another aunt, but used to eat by my aunt because she was a little younger than the other aunt, and as such he he thought he was probably getting a little better food, something a little more modern or something like that. But all this though, Uncle still wasn't earning enough so that he would be comfortable, and they had 2 bedrooms in their apartment. So one bedroom they occupied naturally, and the other bedroom they used to rent out. In those days, it was very, popular that if you had an empty room, you would rent it out. And that was all over the country, not only in Chicago. And they rented out to a man who was a crack salesman on Maxwell Street. He used to do very well, and they were getting rent from him for one room pretty near as much as they had to pay in rent. And for me, they bought a couch that used to open up. And at night, I'd open up the couch and I'd sleep on that couch. And but I was comfortable. I never had any complaints about it. But as strange as it seems, I happened to come in though at a time of a recession. It was a very, very strong recession, as a matter of fact.
What year was it?
In 1921, in February, I came in on February the 15th, 1921. No, it was January 15th, 1921 I came in. And as a matter of fact, Sophie's, your grandma, Sophie's husband, or your grandfather, Saul, he was a very hard worker. He would get anything just so he could get some work, even labor or anything just so it works. And he couldn't get a job. You couldn't buy a job. Yeah. There was a little bit, he was hurt a little because he was a union man. He wasn't a union man yet, but in those days they started organizing the unions very strongly. And he went out one time demonstrating for the union and all that, and they blacklisted him.
Is that right?
So yeah, so he wouldn't. They wouldn't give him a job. He finally.
What was he doing for money?
Huh?
What was he doing for money?
Well, it was very rough. It was very rough. Uncle used to help him quite a bit, and all that, and he used to get a job here and there. But it wouldn't last long. Everybody who knew him liked him very well, and everybody was rooting for him and trying to give him a job. Now, the Berkowitzes, for instance, Emilia's father, actually her uncle, but she was raised by them, called him her father. So Emilia's father one time gave him a few months' work there. And Sib's uncle one time, Sib's uncle was actually a racketeer. He wanted to be a manufacturer. So during the war, he manufactured soap, and he was getting certain ingredients to manufacture soap. And then when the war came along, he couldn't get those ingredients anymore, and he started putting salt in the soap. And somehow or other that didn't go over. He had a good name for his soap. He called his soap Mud.
Is that right?
Yeah, Mud. He used to call him Mud. So he got onto an idea that as long as he can't make the plant go by selling the soap and all that, he'll do the next best thing. He'll incorporate and sell stock. So he used to advertise for people to sell him the stock or to become partners and all that. And what he did is there were plenty of warehouses that were vacant, so he hired about 2, 3 different warehouses. And he would hire people in in one warehouse, and then he'd bring the prospect, the sucker, into that warehouse. And after he'd show him that warehouse and show him how it operates, he'd tell him, well, now come on, I'll drive you over to the other warehouse and show you over there, or the other factory, I don't know what it was. So the fellows that were working there used to get into a car or a truck, and they'd be driven over to the other warehouse or the other factory. They'd be working over there. Then he'd drive them over. So the fellow used to, people, the sucker would think that he was really a big stuff. Well, for your grandfather, it didn't make any difference. It was a job. He didn't do anything wrong. He was paid to so much an hour to do so and so. And there was no other way he could make it, so he accepted. But he quit that. As soon as he was able to, he quit it. But everybody that I know of tried to get him a job. Finally, I don't remember what he got into. One time he even worked in East Chicago. And in East Chicago, he also got a job with somebody of Sib's relatives. He got a job with a brother-in-law of Sib's mother. An aunt of hers lived there. And he went over there and worked at the mills. What's his name worked at the mills over there too, Henry Schaefer. He was a chemist over there. So he got a job over there, and that's how it worked. He just got a job here and there, but the jobs were only good as long as the foreman or the boss or the superintendent didn't have a friend who would take his place.
Yeah.
As soon as somebody else came along, he was never fired because he was a poor worker or he wasn't doing his job right. On the contrary, they used to like him and all that. But, he was fired just the same. But it was hard. Well, you can imagine the situation I came in. Fortunately, Uncle was nice enough, and he let me work for him, and I wasn't getting paid. What the heck, he wasn't making enough to pay me anything. But he would, on Friday, he would give me 25 cents to go take my bath. And the next day, he was nice enough. He even gave me 25 cents to go, over there, it was a dime, to go see a show. To go to see a show on Saturday.
Well, where did he get the money to send?
Who?
Did he send the money for you to come to America?
Yeah, well, they had, they were very thrifty people. They, like I say, he wasn't doing badly. He was doing fairly well, and they saved it, and Sal and your grandma, your grandma and grandpa, they weren't the type to really chisel as much as possible. They didn't take anything from her mother, from his father-in-law, and then there was his uncle, Sal Geller's uncle, your grandpa's uncle, was there too, living not far from there. And your grandpa's uncle came here with Henry Weissman. By the way, I was supposed to go with Henry Weissman and your uncle to America, but somehow or other they left while I was in Bucharest. And they wrote to me, as a matter of fact, if you want to go, why don't you go now? And I had a good job in Bucharest, and I still wasn't quite decided, but after that, when I came back to Focșani, I think it was right after they left, so they left without me. And if you like to know who left, was, you can say, your great-uncle Abe, and his sister Rose, and their mother, and the two children that their mother died in Europe, Henry and what's her sister's name? I forget now. Jesus, not terrible. Sarah. Sarah.
My Uncle Abe is who?
Your uncle Abe, your great uncle Abe, is a brother to your grandfather Sal.
Right. I remember him.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right. You remember
Sure.
him, as a matter of
Sure.
fact. Yeah, he used to be the one who used to like to sing all the time. Yeah. So they were over there too. It was more or less a very. They were close, and they used to see each other. They used to play poker in the evening, and us Sundays or Saturdays. No Sundays, because Saturday you had to work in those days. There was no Saturday off. But on Saturday, Uncle didn't work too much because it was Shabbos. So I used to go to the movies on Saturday, and I used to go. There used to be two movies. They were the first two movies, I think, that Barber and Cat started in Chicago. One of them was the Broadway, and the other one, I can't remember what the name of the other one was. It was a smaller movie. They were in the same block on Roosevelt Road near Ashland. Of course, the Broadway was supposed to be a very, very elegant movie in those days. It was the newest, as a matter of fact, that time. After that, all the others came, like the Chicago and other movies. Those movies, they really, I just waited for the Saturday to come around so I could go to the movies. I didn't play cards. I never got into playing poker or anything like that. It's a funny thing. When I got through with cards in Bucharest, I lost my love for cards completely. I said, if cards can make a person to keep somebody up until in the morning to play cards, that's not for me. So I wasn't a card player. I didn't want to get in any poker game or anything like that. And as a matter of fact, I carried that thing through all the way pretty near until I came here. And here I still don't like to play cards for the what I can make or the gamble of it. I like to play for pleasure,
Right.
and that's pinochle. Well, anyway, so so I didn't have any other sociability, only this, but I picked up some real sociability very fast by going to. In those days, they used to call it the Hebrew Institute. It's the JPI today. They call it the Jewish People Institute. And the Hebrew Institute was about 5-6 blocks away from where I lived. There was also another school over there, and there was also that Hull House was not far there. But the Hull House never interested me. However, the Hebrew Institute interested me, and I went to the Hebrew Institute and started learning English. When I came to the Hebrew Institute, I was really received with open arms, because the teachers over there used to like to learn French. And when I didn't know anything, I'd ask them in French. And they immediately would say, "Oh, parlez-vous français?" and all that. And I didn't have a hard time. As a matter of fact, languages were very easy for me to pick up somehow or other. I was fortunate that way. And I only stayed in that room for the beginners about, I doubt if it was more than 2-3 weeks. And after 2-3 weeks, they said they opened a room for more advanced students and for students who are capable of getting the language faster. So they transferred me to that room there. And when I was in that room, I started to pick up friends, and we walked home from school just like children do here, and with friends. And that's where I met some of them even followed me here as friends. I met a fellow by the name of Karl Fleischer that became my friend, and Isidore Seifer became my friend. There were quite a few others, but those fellows moved, I remember, because Harry Present, who was Karl Fleischer's brother-in-law, moved here to California, and I was very friendly with them. Then went off, well, anyway, and I went to that school, I think, for about a year or two, when I graduated and started going to high school.
High school you went to?
Yeah, and I started going to Medill High. Medill High was in a very tough neighborhood. All that neighborhood, as a matter of fact, became very tough because we weren't far from Taylor Street. We were about a block or so from. As a matter of fact, I think that the Hebrew Institute was on Taylor Street, I think. And Taylor Street was the mafia headquarters. They were the Italians and all that. So I went to Medill High School. We got a teacher over there, and and over there I studied algebra. That was the first time I got acquainted with algebra. And the one teacher over there went right ahead, and she started us off on Shakespeare. I think she was wise. Looking back at it, I think she was quite a Miss Meyer. I remember her name. She was ugly as sin. Nicest little woman ever. So I think looking back that she was wise in starting us off on Shakespeare, because she gave us some motive, some incentive to want to study English and all that. And we would be taking different parts. We studied I think we studied the Merchant of Venice, and especially, and I think we studied Romeo and Juliet, and one more, Macbeth. Yeah, the three of them were the ones that we mostly concentrate on. Yeah, at night. Like I say, it was a very tough neighborhood, not to get away from that. And it was a little scary to be on the street, but nothing ever happened, and we walked on the street. We weren't scared to walk on the street there as we would be here in the city here today, as with all the mafia and all that. But one night we were walking to school. I don't remember if I was walking with somebody or I was by myself, and I saw one car shooting by, and another car running right after it, and in the other car, and the car that that was following it, one man had the door open and he was shooting with a revolver onto the other in the car right ahead of him. Yeah, just like you see it in the movies. You never think that. I think that I finished a year there at Medill's, but I didn't go any further. I thought, well, that was enough. Then we had, I can't recollect very much more about that. Yes, one girl I met there at Medill, and then I didn't see her for about 20 years or so after. I had a very good way of remembering people. And she wasn't really beautiful or anything like that, but I remembered her. And when I had the store on 63rd Street, I saw her and I remembered her. She was married to a fellow who was my customer, and he used to also be Alfred's friend one time. I've worked with him one time. Well, anyway, I remembered her from Adele, and she remembered Miss Myers and all that. Yeah, it really kind of gave me a kick to know that I can remember, and that matter. Well, when I got through what, that happened as far as school is concerned. After that, to get through with the school, then I'll go back to Uncle and how I got a job. When I got through with Medill's, I went to Crane College. And the reason why I went to Crane College in those days was kind of lax. and they would take people in, and if you were good, why they really. But the work was a little bit rougher at Crane College. I just went there for a little while, and then I quit Crane. I couldn't keep it up, not for the work in the daytime, and besides that, I used to also work a little bit at night and on Sundays helping out Uncle, but not much. He didn't ask me. He didn't ask me to help him too much. You would think that. And after that, once more I tried it. I thought maybe if I go to a preparatory school, there was a preparatory school there that would teach you that was after I left Medill, between Medill and Crane. The preparatory school would prepare you in about 12 to 18 months to graduate high school. And I was amazed of how many boys went there at night. And they studied, and they actually went through, they took exams, they took state exams, and they made it. And they went to college from there. Most of them went to Crane, yes. I guess those fellows had it a little easier than I did. I couldn't do it. So that was the extent of my school, my schooling in this country. By that time, when I got through, I spoke good enough English. I spoke good enough English to become I was considered by other people a crackerjack jewelry salesman. So it served my purpose as far as I'm concerned.
When did you get your citizenship?
I got a citizenship pretty around the day I was here 5 years. I was very much up on that. I wanted to be a citizen. I went right away and took out my first papers as I was supposed to. Maybe I avoided a year or two, maybe a year longer. I think you had to be here 2 years before you took them. Maybe I took them on third year, but at fifth year I got my citizenship. Yeah, I want to talk about citizenship. It reminds me about something that took place at Medill High School. When I was at Medill High School, I remember like today that Wilson died. And we were all called in the auditorium, and the principal came in there, and he gave a little talk on Wilson and all that, naturally. And Wilson was a very well-liked man and all that, and he was, he said, you have to, one thing that you should remember as people, newcomers to this country, that you'll find in this country, you'll find people that will be very good and very nice, and you'll always want to respect them and all that. On the other hand, you'll also find people that you won't care so much for, and that they really won't even deserve your respect. Remember that you're here in the same order like if somebody goes into a bank. When you go into a bank, you don't do business with the bank. You do business with the bank. You don't do business with the teller or the person who is going to wait on you in the bank. So just because you might strike a bad teller sometimes or a bad person to do business with, don't take it that that bank is no good.
Right.
Same way with the country. So it kind of, I think that they were very impressive. By the way, when I heard this principal give us that talk, it reminded me very much in Europe. In Europe, when you went to school, it seems like people would always, the teachers weren't just teachers to teach you what you learn in the book, but they were also, you could say, the people that would teach you manners or teach you good reason and all that. And even today, I still remember many of the things that I learned when I was even in my primary grades of school. I remember, if I may go to this, I remember especially one thing, that one teacher who was a very clever man. He became mayor of a town after a while, and he was a neighbor of ours where we lived too. had two real big dogs he always walked with. The Dalmatians, by the way.
Well.
Yeah, big ones. And this teacher would have a saying. He would teach mathematics. So he'd ask sometime a boy, he'd say, how much is 6 and 4? So the boy would say, it's 10. So he'd say, well, how much is 4 and 6? So the boy would stand like this and look at, and say, oh, God, what the heck? So he say, what are you look? So the boy wouldn't know it. Those cases, sometimes maybe he was even bewildered. Maybe. So he said, look at, what's the matter with you? I asked you, when you drink coffee and milk, do you like it? Yes. What do you call it? Coffee and milk. All right. What if I told you you drink milk and coffee? What's the difference? Well, it's still the same thing, isn't it? Don't you drink the same stuff, whether you drink coffee and milk or milk and coffee? Well, anyway, this is only one of the many. I don't know if I could remember them all. So this principle reminded me a lot of this. To wind up this school, I'll go now to getting a job. As I told you, you couldn't get a job in those days, and I worked for Uncle. But Uncle used to have a man who used to come in and sell the materials. Like the people sell different things to garages, so he'd sell materials to jewelers and watchmakers. He'd go around in a car in a little Ford, and he had quite a good supply too. And it was easier for Uncle to buy from him than to go downtown to the shop. Well, this fellow one time, he came in. When he came in one time, Uncle told him, look, how about finding a job for my nephew? He needs a job. So he came in one day, he said, I got a job for your nephew. There is a German jeweler on Lincoln Avenue. And he can go there, but let him go in as an apprentice and learn a little something there. And don't forget that he's German. He probably speaks German. So he got me that job. I went over there. I was interviewed and all that. I went there with Uncle. Naturally, I didn't know how to go by myself. And I got a job. And it paid me a terrific salary. It paid me $18 a week. 18. Yeah, but $18 a week was a big salary. For me, especially in those days, it was a big salary. So I came home and I worked there. When I started working there, up to that time, Uncle never asked me for anything, never said, and used to eat there and sleep there and do some work. Not too much, but some work. And but when I got the job, they told me, look, here everybody pays board. So we'll ask you to pay board as long as you're working. And for board in a room, it's almost unbelievable. I don't think people would believe me if I'd say that, but they charged me $4 for room and board. So I said, oh, for God's sake, how can I say anything about that? And besides that, I had some of the best food I ever had in my life, because Grandma was, she was your great-grandma. Right. She was one of the nicest little women, most very quiet. She was sort of a pretty woman too, very quiet. Very fine cook, and all she'd ever do from morning to night, cook. And when she was through with her kitchen and her house and kitchen were spick and span. You just couldn't, you could lick off the floor for near. So I worked there.
How long was it before you got the job after you were there?
I don't remember, but I would say that it wasn't more than about a month or two.
That fast?
Yeah. And between the time, I want to mention here that
you have to wrap up too.
You have to. I was lucky that I was a watchmaker. And as a watchmaker, I was able to get the job there.
Oh.
So anyway, I worked there 3 months, and unfortunately, somebody came in, and some auctioneers, and they offered my boss over. Well, I might as well wind it up to where I worked for this German fellow until next time, because maybe I'll have something to say about working there.
Okay.
Is that all right?
That's
Should I wind up now,
Yeah.
or yeah,
That's
wind up
fine.
now?
And we'll do the
Okay.
rest next time.
Yeah.
Okay.